Good morning, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of having an outdoor-based YouTube channel talking about watches set in the UK. Seemed like a good idea at the time until I realised it's constantly grey, gloomy, dark and oppressive, which both A, makes your videos really grey, dark, gloomy and oppressive, and difficult to film because you have a not waterproof camera with watches. Today's episode, we will be talking about 5 watch opinions I have that might possibly get me cancelled. Well, not really cancelled, actually, because it's just watches in it. But it's 5 opinions that you may or may not agree with. And if you don't agree with it, it will be so rage-inducing, you're going to be like, you keyboard words. It's been a very long week this week. Can you tell? Let's get on with it. 5 things, let's go. That's better. I've lifted you guys up by about that much. So anyway, thing number 1. So I actually did a whole video on this last week, so it's kind of cheating a little bit. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it at the end. If you have seen it, then you'll know what I'm going to say. And this would be that there is no correlation, in my humble opinion, between the cost of the watch and the amounts that you will go on to enjoy said watch. Now, because there's already a video on this, I won't go into it in too much detail, but the premise is fairly simple, right? That your watches that you form a connection with are usually formed that way because you have some reason to have a connection with it. For example, you have a watch that was given to you by your spouse the day you got married, or you have a watch that was given to you by your father, or you have a watch that represents an achievement in your life that cost a great deal of money, but it's sentimental because the achievement, not implicitly because the finishing is better, the movement is better, etc, etc. Now, there will be a small number of collectors out there who do very much cherish the minor details, and for those, fair enough, the actual cost of a watch may be a linear return on the amount that you go on to enjoy that watch. But I'm not convinced it's ever been proportional. I don't think that there is enough robust evidence from my collecting journey to suggest that the more I've spent on a watch, it has gone on to be a watch I love the most. Number 2. So, I have just sold a chronograph about 2 weeks ago. My unpopular opinion is about chronographs. I don't really think anybody needs a chronograph, particularly. Let me explain. Some chronographs are extremely good looking watches. The Rolex Daytona, not my personal favourite chronograph, but I do objectively recognise this is a really good looking watch. The Tag Heuer Monaco, I actually think it's a really handsome watch if you've got a wrist big enough to take one. I think the Omega Speedmaster is a really good looking watch, the classic man on the moon. When it comes to chronographs, I think most watch complications fundamentally should be useful. For example, a GMT is a genuinely useful complication if you work with people abroad, or if you travel a lot, or just for when you go on holiday out of time zones and it's nice to know what the time is back home for phoning and checking in with your family and sending them pictures and all that sort of stuff. A date complication, genuinely useful. I didn't know today's date. It's the 7th, by the way. I'm filming this the day before it goes out. There you go. So now I know the date. A day complication, again, most of us know the day of the week. We don't really need our watch to tell us that. But there will be folks out there who are, again, maybe on holiday, they might be retired, they may not have a fixed routine. And in that sense, actually being orientated to the day is quite useful. However, I'm not convinced that the same can be said for chronographs. I can tell you all the times I've owned a chronograph, I don't currently have one in my collection, I've just sold one recently. I don't think I have ever used my chronograph to time something other than when I've been looking for an excuse to use my chronograph. For example, one of my wonderful commenters posted on one of my videos recently when I made this point about the Rolex Daytona having never been used to time a race ever. They said that they knew people who would take their Ferraris and other fancy cars to track days, and their friends in the pit while they're going round would time their friends on their Daytonas. And I thought, that is finding an excuse to use your watch, isn't it? If you really were that interested in the timing of your race, you would probably buy a telemetry for your car, right? Or you might get something of that nature. Now, It's not a problem I have particularly, or I'm probably ever likely to have, so I can't speak as to the practicality of that as a solution for timing your friends as they hoon around racetracks. But it does seem, it's a different world. It's not a world I live in, but I can't find any other reasons why I would particularly use a chronograph. If I'm doing cooking, for example, boiling an egg or whatever, I just use the smart speaker in the kitchen. Chronographs look great and they're really sort of cool and sort of functionally a bit clever and quite interesting, but there's not really much use for them, is there? Let's be honest. Anyway, number 3. There are a lot of Omega diehards out there. I myself am an Omega owner, like an Omega, no problems with Omega. However, there is a school of thought out there that Omega is a thinking man's kind of Rolex, that they're better than Rolex, that they have some more heritage in certain areas, and that Omega is greater than Rolex. And then there's another school of people out there who argue really vociferously that Rolex is definitely a better watch brand than Omega, and they have this sort of, within the watch collecting space, as you all know, this sort of tug of war, this permanent comparison, Seamasters versus Submariners, Speedies versus Daytonas. This whole thing goes on, right? My opinion, I am going to pick a side. I don't think Omega is better than Rolex. And it feels like such a non-true enthusiast position to hold, because we're sort of supposed to root for the underdog, and we're supposed to root for against the sort of hype watches and all this sort of stuff. But having owned both, having spent a lot of time with both, maybe it's just my wrist, maybe it's just my taste, because of course so much of this is subjective, isn't it? It's what you see, it's in the eye of the beholder. I generally find that Rolex watches are slightly better proportioned for me. I find them slightly more comfortable, again for me, but I do find their finishing to be very good. Their movements, you know, you can go back and forward on the whole movement thing, but to me, in every real lived scenario, their timekeeping is basically equal. You know, I think that I don't really time my watches how many seconds they're losing a day, other than the first week I own them particularly. So getting into accuracy arguments, I think practically makes little difference. I think a lot of this comes down to just what you like and what looks good on you. But if you had to, you know, like if the men came and were like, make a decision, and made me pick which brand do I prefer, I think I would marginally go for Rolex, I think. Number 4. Self-confessed, I am a bit of a Grand Seiko fanboy. Now, I'm sure a lot of the people who watch this channel actually are a bit like me, and they're Grand Seiko fanboys as well, because this channel, I think, it's a small watch YouTube channel, isn't it? You know, it's going to attract a very certain type of collector. You know, I'm not going to have a huge amount of casual watch buying subscribers. Someone who's buying a watch for the first time probably isn't going to subscribe, follow, and watch a YouTube channel like this, unless they're a friend of mine being supportive who has no interest in watches, who just tunes in to laugh at me behind my back or something. I think most of the time, people watching a channel are going to be really sort of into their watches. And I think as a result, most of them are probably going to like Grand Seiko. But if you move outside of a small community like this one and go to the bigger community, you will encounter a lot of Grand Seiko hate. Now, even though that may irritate some people, you know, people with these constant, really boring and tiring comparisons, Grand Seiko are better than Rolex, Grand Seiko are this, Grand Seiko are that, Grand Seiko are Patek finishing for Omega money, and all these ludicrous comparisons that people will insist on making, I just can't get on board with the Grand Seiko hatred. I just can't, you know. I just think it's nonsense. I think they make really great watches. I do, I can't help myself. I think the bracelets are a bit rubbish. I will accept the haters have got a point where the bracelets are concerned. But the watches themselves, great. Opinion number 5. Again, you might think that as a watch purist collector like I am, I would be all about mechanical. And yes, in the main, I wear mostly mechanical watches. Mostly, not exclusively, but mostly. But I don't really count myself as a mechanical only sort of collector. For example, I've spent most of last week wearing a G-Shock. Again, quartz. I mean, we have a bit of a blind spot where G-Shock is concerned a lot of the time, because I think G-Shock doesn't really count as a quartz watch because it's a digital watch. But I would say that I have quartz analog watches, and I think they're fine. I have absolutely no problem with the quartz watch. I think a quartz watch gives you really great accuracy, good reliability, great prices. You can make different case shapes and proportions and dimensions, and you can do lots of good stuff with a quartz. And there are some really cracking quartz watches at really affordable prices you can have so much fun with. And it comes back to point number one. Price and enjoyment are not the same thing. You can really enjoy a quartz watch for £105, £110 and have a great relationship with it. Just because it's quartz, well, so what? What difference does it make? And there we go, there we have it. My 5 probably slightly unpopular to a larger or lesser degree opinions about watch collecting. Do let me know your unpopular watch beliefs down below. If you agree with any of them, again, it's nice to hear that I'm not talking complete nonsense. And if you disagree with any, I'd love to hear your reasons why. Anyway, you guys are the best. Take care, peace out. Nice and quick and easy one from me today. I'll see you next week. Weekly uploads. If you're not a member of this community, do feel free to subscribe because, you know, we have a bit of fun, don't we?